There's a lot of confusion surrounding the Gene Hackman case. You're confused, she's confused, and he's confused in hell. Even I'm confused at this point. But can you really blame us for being confused? I mean, they have changed the story and small details within this story like 6 or 7 times. Of course, people are going to be confused. And even though this is going to be an annoying video for me to make, I had to bring the Stanley Cup for this one. It's also a necessary video because I would like to clear up at least some of the confusion surrounding some of the details in this case. And one of the main sources of confusion in this case is the dogs. There's a lot of confusion surrounding the dogs because we've been given different stories about them. The investigators and police, they misidentified the dog that died. A lot of weird stuff going on with the dogs. Now, when this story initially broke, the initial reports stated that Betsy and Gene were found dead, and that one of their dogs was found dead lying close to Betsy in the bathroom. But 2 of their dogs were outside, roaming outside, and they were in good health. Now, it was initially believed and reported that the dogs that were outside, they survived because they were small enough to go out of a doggy door. And they survived on whatever water or food they could find outside or what have you. And the dog that was found dead inside died of starvation and dehydration because there was no water or food and the dog was too big to get out of the doggy door because the dog that died inside was a German Shepherd. They never mentioned the breeds of the other 2 dogs, at least at first. But quickly, those details started changing. And they started changing by the hour. The story then changed to, the dog was not found dead next to Betsy in the bathroom. The dog was closed or locked away in a closet. And that's why the dog starved. That's why the dog died. And then, before you know it, it changed again to no, the dog was actually found locked in a crate. Now, mind you, there's still 2 dogs roaming around outside. At least that's what we think, because they then changed the story that there was 1 dog outside, 1 dog dead inside, and another dog that was alive found next to Betsy. So you can obviously see where some of the confusion is coming in now, right? Mind you, they went from saying that these dogs were small enough to go out of the doggy door and the other wasn't, to wait, we don't even know if there's a doggy door at all. Maybe the back door was open, maybe it wasn't, who knows? Now that's kind of a small detail in the grand scheme of things, but it's also a major detail when you really think about it. And it's annoying if you're someone that's trying to properly cover a case. Either the back door is open or the back door is shut. This is not a huge mystery. We don't need to deal in what ifs. You know what I mean? But that's what we're given. Oh, maybe it was a doggy door. Maybe the back door was open, closed. Who knows? Front door ajar. No, the front door is closed. And it's just so confusing trying to keep up with things. And now, in the latest chain of events, within the past couple of days, an entirely new story has come out. That the 2 surviving dogs, they were heroes. They led the emergency services. They led the paramedics to Gene and Betsy. But how could they do that if you found one of them inside? So you see, the story just keeps changing. We don't know if the dogs were found outside, if one was found inside. We don't know any of this anymore because they've changed the story 6 or 7 times. And just as of 2 or 3 days ago, they changed the story once again. But it gets even more confusing, y'all. Because as I mentioned, police and investigators, they misidentified the dog that was dead. It turns out the dog they said was dead was actually alive and well at a doggy daycare. Now they're reporting that the dogs that were found either outside, inside, who knows, they changed the story. The dogs that were found alive and well, now they're reporting that they took them to the doggy daycare. But at first, the owner of the doggy daycare is the one that spoke out. investigators didn't know that they messed up the details and misidentified the dog. The doggy daycare owner spoke out and said, hey, that dog's not dead because that dog is in my care. And the last time I saw Betsy was when she dropped that dog off to me in January. That's literally what the doggy daycare owner stated. He said that he used to go out to eat with Jean and Betsy all the time before the pandemic. But after the pandemic, or during the pandemic, Betsy got really scared. She wouldn't let people around Jean anymore. So he would still talk to Betsy and see Betsy. He said their last conversation was normal, that she dropped off the dog and he never saw her again. Now, that would usually mean that, hey, Betsy never came to pick up the dog. If the last time you saw Betsy and talked to Betsy was when she dropped off her dog last month, that would usually mean that you just had the dog in your care this entire time. But now we're learning, no, the dog was actually returned to Betsy and Jean somehow, and then returned back to the doggy daycare after they found them dead. And that's where more confusion comes in, because people are trying to figure out how many dogs did they really have. You see, Jean and Betsy, they would take care of rescue dogs. They would bring rescue dogs in. Sometimes when you bring in a rescue dog, you might not keep them. Sometimes Jean and Betsy would take care of dogs and not necessarily keep them. You know what I mean? They would take care of them for a little while until they found a home, what have you. And sometimes in recent years, Jean's health was getting bad. So sometimes they needed a break. They needed help. So they would drop their dogs off at doggy daycare for a few days, maybe a week, so they can rest, because taking care of 3 or 4 grown German Shepherds, that's kind of hard, especially when you're 95 years old. So that's where a lot of this confusion is coming from with the dogs. As of right now, the story is they had 3 dogs, 1 found dead in a crate, 1 found roaming around outside, 1 led the paramedics to Jean and Betsy. That's what we're told to believe now. So whatever confusion there was with the dogs, that's where the confusion came from. I'm hoping this kind of clears things up, even though I find myself getting confused trying to explain the confusion. Now, a lot of people have been asking, why was the dog locked in a crate? And some people have been saying or insinuating that Jean and Betsy were cruel pet owners for locking their dog away in a crate, but that's not the case at all. Everyone who was close to Jean and Betsy said that they were wonderful, loving pet owners. They loved their dogs more than they loved Jean's kids, okay? They treated their pets very, very well. The reason the dog was locked in a crate is because the dog recently had surgery and the vet told them to keep the dog on crate rest, which means you keep the dog in a crate so it doesn't re-injure itself or, reopen any wounds from surgery or what have you. It's a perfectly normal thing that vets will recommend after your dog has an operation or something along those lines. But there's also some confusion surrounding, why was Betsy so reclusive in the final days of their life? In the final months, some could even say the final years of their life. And I was confused about this too. Because it was said that they were very social and active in the community. And then kind of out of nowhere, they just became super duper reclusive. Betsy wouldn't even call her mom or her family anymore. Jean rarely talked to his kids, but also they stopped being as active in the community. Neighbors stopped seeing them as much. People who used to come over to their house and have dinner parties or go out to eat together, have lunch dates, they no longer would see them anymore. And I was wondering if something bad happened, if they had a bad experience that made them kind of become reclusive. Now we have kind of an explanation. Because, the explanation was kind of given earlier on in this video. It turns out that Betsy got really freaked out by the pandemic. And Betsy was really concerned that people were going to get Jean sick. So ever since around 2020, Betsy basically cut off contact between anyone else and Gene. Gene's friends and business partners no longer got to hang out with Gene. People who used to go out to eat with Gene, they were no longer allowed to go out to eat with Gene. Basically, Betsy shut Ish down because she was scared that Gene was very vulnerable and that someone would get him sick. She was very health conscious, very freaked out by the pandemic. And that's why they became so reclusive. And it's kind of ironic and kind of weird that someone that was so freaked out by the pandemic, so worried about that virus, actually died of another virus. And it's weird that someone who was so on top of their health, that we can't even allow people around Gene anymore, so health conscious, but didn't realize that she was sick. Didn't realize that she had the hantavirus. Spent the last 4 or 5 years trying to protect her and her husband from a virus only to die, allegedly, from a virus that I guess she didn't know she had. The world works in mysterious ways. I'll just put it like that. And this shows you that things happen, and sometimes when it's your time, it's your time. You can take all the precautions and do everything necessary, and things still happen. And here we have this woman who basically shut down her and Gene's entire social life for the last 5 years to protect themselves from a virus, winds up supposedly dying from a virus that I guess she had no idea she had, because she was in contact with the pharmacy. She was in contact with a doctor even after she was supposedly dead. So it's definitely, it's weird, but it's also eye-opening. And I hope that this video clears up at least a tidbit of the confusion surrounding this case. There's still more confusion. I'm expecting a new story to drop tomorrow, or a new narrative. Who knows what will happen next, but this is where we're at right now. Let me know your thoughts, though, down in the comments below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next one.